have a gas blender certification. I think that is a very, very good thing to have. It's essentially like a bartender course for nerds.
Yeah, it's like mixology. So the enriched air part means that it's normal air, which is normally 21-ish percent oxygen and 79-ish percent nitrogen. They're the fractions that we use, but they're not 100% correct. They're close enough. And to enrich the air would mean add more oxygen to the mix.
Welcome to Dive Around the World, the podcast that brings you stories, insights, and adventure from beneath the surface. Each episode, we explore the people, places, and passion that make diving more than just a sport.
Welcome to another episode of the Dive Around the World podcast. Today we have a new topic, new program. And it's actually not a new program. It is an updated program, and that is Enriched in Nitrox. Adam, are you excited?
Yeah, I'm excited to tell people about our next update in the series of updates to all our specialties. So really happy to get it and waiting for people to get it in their hands.
Nitrox is actually our most popular specialty out of all of them. So right after open water dive, and Nitrox is the most encouraged and most used specialty also. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what Nitrox is, why should everybody be diving on Nitrox, and a little bit on what has changed for the ones who've already done their Nitrox with SSI.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, like all of our programs, the manual will be there for everybody to reread in if they want to. So there's a lot of information in Nitrox. It's a really cool program.
I agree. And you gotta love Nitrox. So wait, let's get into it, Adam. The first question that a lot of people out there ask is, what is it?
So
what is Nitrox?
Well, it comes from the name enriched air, Nitrox. So the enriched air part means that it's normal air, which is normally 21-ish percent oxygen and 79-ish percent nitrogen. They're the fractions that we use, but they're not 100% correct. They're close enough. And to enrich the air would mean add more oxygen to the mix. Okay. And that makes nitrox. So it's nitrogen and oxygen, which is the mix, nitrox, with the added oxygen content. So we consider anything more than 21% oxygen to be a nitrox mix. And then it will increase the oxygen level, which will then subsequently decrease the nitrogen level. And that's basically what nitrox is.
More oxygen, we notice, is better.
To a point. The key thing about nitrox is not actually the increased oxygen, it's the reduced nitrogen. So by reducing the amount of nitrogen that your body takes in, you can stay underwater longer, or you can go to a same depth as you would with air and have less total nitrogen absorption, thus making the profile a little bit more conservative. So you're not taking on as much gas. The good reasons to dive with nitrox.
And now let's talk a little bit more on why people let's get into this a bit more. Why people should be diving with nitrox. Most people think, it's because I can go and I dive deeper. But that is obviously not true. We know this. But why is that not true?
So it's not true because oxygen is actually poisonous. So pure oxygen has a depth limit of 6 meters. And then the more oxygen in the mix, the depth at which we can breathe it to without it becoming a problem for our body gets shallower. So with air, the maximum depth is around between 50 and 60 meters, depending on the maximum partial pressure you want to use. When we're using an enriched air, it's going to be shallower than that 50 or 60 meters. So eventually it's going to come down until you reach pure oxygen, which is a limit around about 6 meters. That's a partial pressure of 1.6 because it's the partial pressure that affects our body. So if you think about taking nitrox, you're not going to be able to go deeper. But what you could potentially do is you could stay deeper for longer because you won't be taking on as much nitrogen. So you don't actually go deeper, but then if you went with somewhere with air, you could potentially stay that depth for a longer period. However, it's important to know that nitrox doesn't slow down how fast you breathe the gas. So you're actually going to breathe the gas at the same rate. So if a cylinder lasts you an hour, a cylinder's still going to last you an hour with nitrox in. But maybe you can stay that little bit deeper longer if you not reach the no decompression limit, which is the amount of nitrogen absorbed in your body, and then make your ascent a little bit later. So if you're good on gas, nitrox is a really good benefit. Even if you're not so good on gas, taking nitrox means you can stay that little bit deeper, that little bit longer.
Awesome. So that's obviously the main benefit of nitrox. It's the bottom time being a little bit longer at certain depths. obviously not too deep, and you're obviously not allowed to go deeper. Is there any other reasons why people should really do a nitrox course?
So nitrox is, of course, everybody must do. So it's basically our first specialty. A lot of centres combine it with the open water diver. A lot of centres offer free nitrox when you're diving, and some centres don't even offer air at all. You know, there's a good adage in diving that air is for tyres and nitrox is for divers. So we want to try and dive on the best gas that we can possible. By doing that, you'll get longer dive time. If you think about adding conservatism to your dive, if you're going to come out from the dive at which the point your body is totally saturated with nitrogen, so you can just make an ascent to the surface. If you were to do that same dive using a nitrox, then likely you'll finish the dive with less total absorbed nitrogen. And then that makes you safer, because remember, our risk of decompression comes based on total absorption and the pressure differential. So if we don't absorb so much nitrogen, then we won't have such a risk. So you can make your dives more conservative by doing the same profile you're doing on air, but using nitrox.
That's awesome. So it obviously it just makes us generally feel safer. People give tell you a lot of other things about nitrox. I mean, when a dive center sells you the nitrox, it's like, oh, you're never going to be tired ever again. You will feel absolutely refreshed. I like to compare it to, how all these spas start to do these hyperbaric treatments now where they put you on oxygen. And it's all these like bougie spas that say, oh, you're going to be healthier. You're going to feel better.
Yeah.
And it's essentially like that. But is that a fact?
So it's not really a fact. There's insufficient evidence to claim that nitrox reduces fatigue. But there is definitely a placebo effect. If you think it's going to make you feel better, quite often you'll feel better. The theory goes that if you have less dissolved nitrogen in your body, then your body's not fighting it so much. So you don't feel as if your body's done as much work. And that potentially could make you feel less tired, but I'm not sure that's 100% true. There's definitely not really a lot of evidence. The other cool thing is, if you think about it, we are at exposed higher particle pressures of oxygen. We're exposed to high pressures of oxygen, just like HbO2, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So if you imagine, we are actually taking in high pressure oxygen. So there is potential that it will, help you repair body tissue quicker and stuff like that. But I don't think it's anything that we get in these short late range dives that we do.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the updated manual. Obviously, the information in there and how nitrox works has not really changed, has it?
No, you're right. So the gas laws haven't changed. What nitrox is hasn't changed. How we should analyze it and dive with it hasn't really changed. But what we've done is we've tried to, like all of our specialty manuals, we've improved how the manual reads. So it's clearer, more lesson-based structure. That means you can read a chunk and come back to your book later and continue where you were without having to worry too much about what comes next and what came before. Obviously, the academic content's focused a little bit more on real world application. So we tell you what something does, and then we explain how it's going to actually affect you when you're diving. We give a little bit of an example about gas management and safe dive practices. And it's focused now a lot more on computer diving, especially taken from our computer diving manual. So how to actually apply nitrox diving to going diving with a computer, for instance. This means it's a lot more interesting to read, and we go a little bit into more detail. So it's really a great idea.
So that's actually a good segue. And I want to talk equipment now. Obviously, you're starting off with a computer, right? Every diver, period, should be owning their own computer. But I believe nitrox is one of those places that is, when you do your nitrox specialty, that's the best time when you can buy a new computer, right?
Yeah, when you go through your class. Yeah, when you go through your nitrox class, of course, we're going to talk about how to program computers, and your instructor will show you. So if you already have your computer, when you go take your nitrox program, then they can program it with yours. So you'll kind of get an idea of the features. I know a lot of people struggle with the features and how to actually program their dive computers. So doing it with a pro is a really great idea.
Yeah, 100%. And also, you don't need a ridiculously expensive, amazing mega dive computer to dive. Every computer can do nitrox.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any computers anymore that can do just air. Maybe I'm wrong. Comment in the box if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure like almost all computers do at least one nitrox, maybe even 2 or 3 now. So I don't think there's any problem.
So let's talk computers. It's obviously something they have the features for nitrox, but computers can sometimes be technically a little bit tricky to use. Having a pro there that can show you the computer and that it can explain it obviously allows you to learn your own computer, and it allows you to learn all of the features. I know I'm also not the person who will buy the equipment and then go through every single feature, but I know Adam is one of those, right?
Yeah. Obviously, being from the technical dining background, I like to have a lot of equipment and try and use it to its maximum. But yeah, when you get a dive computer and you just dive in with air, quite often you can use it directly out the box. You might set a conservatism level or a personal factor, but you can just put it on your wrist and go diving. It'll turn on in the water. But you're not using many of its features. When you do the Nitrox training with an instructor, they can explain a little bit more about things like the depth alarm, because like we said, Nitrox has a maximum depth. You might want to think about how to monitor the NDL when you're using Nitrox diving. So you want to be able to input different gases into the dive computer. You can track things like your oxygen exposure, which is the amount of oxygen you've taken on over time. And so your dive computer is doing this anyway, but having an understanding about what it's doing and how it displays that information to you can obviously make your diving a little bit more safe and keep you a little bit more informed.
Yeah, 100%. Having your own computer is one of the first purchases you should make as a new diver. It's always this. For me, it's mask, maybe mask, fin, snorkel, and then computer.
Yeah, right.
That's the order I suggest.
If you don't have a computer, you're probably going to dive to a table, right? Or you're going to dive to a more conservative profile. You're going to dive to the guide who's a little bit shallower than everybody else or whatever. So the idea is if you've got a dive computer from the very beginning, you get more diving. Because a dive computer is working out your exact profile for you, it'll give you the maximum NDL, which means that you can get more diving for your money. And so if you want to maximize the time you spend in the water, which is what we all want to do, which is why we learn to dive, then you can do that by having a dive computer. So a lot of people see it like maybe one of the first purchases. You can have a dive computer. You don't have to worry about packing it because they fit on your wrist. You don't have to worry about, having to keep it really, really safe because it's with you all the time. And then, just jump in the water, it'll turn itself on. So dive computers are really, really simple first, like I say. I think it's it's almost a mandatory piece of equipment now.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of technology developing, right? So having an Apple Watch Ultra right now, or more and more smart watches are going to start introducing this. You can actually use just your regular smartwatch to dive, if your smartwatch obviously has the feature. And that also allows, the cool thing is it allows you to then, if you have the Maris app, for example, you can then work with your SSI app. And you can track your dives, and it's just this little bit of technology. I think there's a lot of more features coming in future, and potential integration of AI and whatever can happen with computers because this technology is there now, right?
Yeah, obviously the technology is moving really, really fast, but we're seeing, obviously you're Bluetooth and importing dive logs. That's the basic functions. But now we've got things like, it can do GPS waypoints and they can figure out, where your profile was based on the compass that's internally. You can do things like track your dive, the gas on your computer, and then get a load of metrics from it about how you're consuming gas, about how to dive better in the water. There's dive computers with sensors in them now that detect your trim position in the water, so help you become more streamlined. And so, the dive computers are evolving really, really quickly. So there's some interesting stuff happening on the market, especially with smartwatches. And of course, the cool thing about a smartwatch is you gain your calorie count for your diving, which is quite high, right? So if you're trying to get your steps in, if you're trying to get your rings closed, if you're trying to get your, to your move goals, then you can do that by using your smartwatch, whether it's a Garmin or one of the Suunto ones that track body compositions, or one of the Maris Apple Watch Ultras. So all of those will be able to get you a calorie count for your diving as well.
That's so cool. Okay, now that's computers. Obviously, the next thing you need in order to do Nitrox is an analyzer. Should every diver have their own?
So sometimes it's worth having your own analyzer because you're not having to wait for it. It's accurate and correct. And now they're pocket-sized. So they're not even that much of a difficulty to look after anymore. A lot of divers won't travel with an analyzer just because they want to keep it safe and they'll use one in resort. But then you find that actually it would have been super cool if I had one with me. So now you can buy little pocket-sized analyzers that connect to your smartphone, and they use your phone as a screen. And it's very easy then to analyze gas for yourself. You're confident that your analyzer is well looked after, clean, and the gas mix is exactly what you want. So yeah, I recommend divers do have their own analyzer. I have 2 or 3 analyzers, and they're something that are very easy to look after and access. They have a battery and a sensor in them. The sensor lasts about 12 months, and the battery, is either rechargeable or changes it every couple of months. So they're really cool, and I recommend everybody should get one.
Centers do have to offer them, though. If they do offer Nitrox, they have to also offer an analyzer if you don't have one or your personal analyzer is broken. Now, that actually brings me to my next question. And this is something I always get asked when I teach this program. How is Nitrox made?
So nitrox. So how do we make nitrox? So we use the air around us generally. And there's 2 different ways to then use the air around us. We can use what's called a membrane system, which you can think of like a set of filters. And so it draws in normal air on one side, and it blows out nitrogen on the other side and collects some of the oxygen. It'll then collect that and boost it through a compressor to make enriched nitrox. They're good up to about 30, 40%. Above 40%, they start to become a little bit inefficient. You're using a lot of energy to try and filter out all that nitrogen and pump it into a tank. So they're great, those membrane systems, for nitrox 32, which is 32% oxygen, which is what most centers around the world will offer as a standard gas. But for the higher percentages, then it's not really worth using the membrane system, in which case you'll use partial pressure blending. And partial pressure blending is where you will put pure oxygen into a cylinder first and then top it up with air. And we do a little bit of math to work out how much oxygen to put in and how much air to put in. And then we eventually will mix together in the cylinder and end up with the right blend. If you are interested in that, there's a really great program offered by SSI called Gas Blender. And Gas Blender's got 2 flavors. It's got a nitrox version and it's got a trimix version, which is blending with helium as well. So if you wanted to think about blending your own gas or just knowing how the gas is blended, then the Gas Blender program is great to do, because it's a dry program that's taught in your center, and you'll go through what about the gases and how they all work and how to mix them, all the calculations. And then you'll actually go ahead and blend some gases. So you'll do cylinders from empty plus topping off cylinders. So your cylinder's partially full already to make a new mix. And so it gives a really, really deep insight to what the dive center's doing to make your mixes for you if you want to know.
That is a very interesting course, by the way. If ever you also want to maybe work in a dive center, I'm of the very firm opinion that every dive professional should know how to mix, at least how to basically use a compressor, but also have a gas blender certification. I think that is a very, very good thing to have. It's essentially like a bartender course for nerds.
Yeah, it's like mixology. I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
Different flavors. This actually brings me a little bit to the next thing I want to talk about. And that is, where does nitrox come from, the idea of nitrox, and why mix gases in the first place? I know you're from the XR background, so you know.
Yeah, so nitrox was actually a technical diving gas originally, and had a really bad reputation for being dangerous, and people shouldn't dive in nitrox. And as the years have moved on, we've started to understand how the gases behave in our body, and we've started to understand that actually there's a big benefit from using nitrox, especially for recreational diving within certain limits. Because we've now set these limits and set it, then using nitrox is a great idea. You can use it to either make your dives more conservative. You can use it to give you more NDL, more no decompression limit at a certain depth. You can use it to decompress with. So if you're doing our decompression diving program, you can use nitrox to then force or push the nitrogen out of your body faster as a decompression gas. So there's a lot of benefits. And so having a nitrox certification is the first step in all of those things. If you think about doing your deep diving specialty, you're not going to get very long at between 35 and 40 meters. If you want more time, if you take a nitrox 28, so 28% oxygen, then you'll be able to gain about an extra 15% time on the bottom, which will give you more time to experience the depth, to do the checks with your dive computer to make sure that you've got a little bit of time to have a look around. So it's a really great idea to put nitrox with all of our other specialties as well, with decompression diving or deep diving. So yeah, it's a great start.
So now let's talk a little bit about the exit option. So we obviously have this one bundle called Enriched Nitrox, and there's 2 exit options, one being 32 and one being 40. What's the difference?
Okay, so yeah, we've always had these two exit options. And for those of you that know it already, just pay attention to the small difference. But for those that don't know, Nitrox 32, that's designed as a program for people to use Nitrox 32 as if it was air. So you'll be able to basically understand it and use it as a gas. These are for centers that don't offer anything but nitrox, so that the open water dives can do their open water and nitrox, or all your dives can be on nitrox. And it's a very, very simple and easy course to access because it doesn't require any practical application. You don't need to analyze tanks. You don't need to have cylinders of nitrox available. You can do it either all online or theory only. You'll do all of the academics. So we want everybody to know everything about nitrox and answer the final exam, but you won't need to do the practical application session. If you want to continue and do the full enriched air nitrox, which we call nitrox 40, which is 40% as a maximum, then you need to do the practical application session, which is how to analyze nitrox, marking cylinders, obtaining fills, filling in the fill log. So all the practical parts. 32, basically there for people who want to use nitrox. They still have to dive the analyzed gas though. So they'll watch a professional analyze the gas or the center analyze the gas, so that they still have that responsibility of their breathing gas, but it will be limited to 32%, which is well within inside the maximum depth of scuba diving that most divers dive to. And they'll mark their tanks the same, obviously, but the big difference will be that the gas is 32% analyzed by a pro, where Nitrox 40 divers will have the full thing.
The really cool thing about this course is that you can actually do it online with your training center. So if you have a liveaboard trip planned, because I think this is one of the main places where you do really want nitrox because of the extended bottom times. If you have a liveaboard trip planned and you do not have a nitrox certification right now, go on Scuba Go and check. There is a whole bunch of nitrox courses in your language offered online that you can go do over 1 or 2 evenings with your training center, and you can at least get to 32 nitrox so you can dive it on your next liveaboard trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that can be done last minute. So if you're interested, you can get the materials, download those to your phone, read them, and then just do an online session. That's the final exam. So it's a great tool to just add to your repertoire. Then when you get to your resort, then of course I really recommend upgrading to the full Nitrox 40. It gives you more scope. You can do dives with different mixers, so the upgrading later is also possible.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome. I think one more thing that might be really interesting is for training centers. And training centers sometimes are worried if they don't offer nitrox in the center because they don't have the compressor equipment to mix their own nitrox. They maybe don't have access to another center. Maybe it's difficult to get oxygen or membrane wherever they are. Can they still teach nitrox, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely.
Enriched
Like
nitrox.
I said, the Enriched Air Nitrox program only needs for the 32% can be taught without access to nitrox, and then it's you teaching an analyzer use and everything for nitrox 40. In which case, then it makes sense to have access to some gas. But yeah, you can.
That's awesome. So you can go to your dive center, and pretty much all SSI instructors actually go through the training to become a nitrox enriched nitrox instructor. So we can essentially all teach it as SSI instructors, and that's a really cool thing. That means you can go up to any SSI instructor and ask them, make sure that you have the specialty. It's essentially one of them. A lot of centers actually already do this, but it should be just combined with open water diver.
Yeah, so it's so popular that, I'm not sure of the percentage, but a huge percentage of our divers take it. And the more nitrox divers we get out there in the world, the more accessible nitrox will be, because dive centers will realize the benefit of the people asking for it. Most liveaboards you go on now will offer free nitrox. If you go to a lot of resorts, they offer it as a bonus, maybe for returning customers, that they give you free nitrox, because oxygen isn't super expensive, which is great. So there's no really a need to not dive nitrox, honestly. If you dive nitrox, less total nitrogen load in, longer bottom times, there's no real downside to it. So we should do it pretty much exclusively.
Especially if you go on a diving holiday and you want to do a lot of repeated dives. If you go on a holiday and you do one single dive, it doesn't make such a big difference. But if you want to do repeated diving, continuous diving, more than one dive a day, it does make the biggest difference, not just in your bottom time, but also just in the general well-being of how you can feel and how long you can dive after.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
is for anybody doing a diving. If you don't have nitrox yet, it is the time. It is the time. Maybe not. So with this new program, it works like any other new update that we do. Is if you currently have been taking this course and it has the old context, it actually changes and you might be losing your progress or you might have lost your progress. But the good thing is you now have a new book, a new and improved book that is really exciting and much more interesting to read. And your professional can guide you through, your instructor can guide you through what you need to do in order to get your certification. If you don't have Nitrox yet and you haven't gotten the kit yet, you should absolutely get it now. There's new images in it. It's a lot more interesting and easier to understand how the manual is built up, the way, just how SSI manuals work now, the programs, just easier to read and much more fun.
Yeah, so for all of the pros out there, as soon as this manual arrives, you should reread it to make sure that you understand the latest content. If you're doing a course currently, just wait for the new material because it's going to be so much better than the one you've got already. And if you've done Nitrox in the past, of course, we also support you and you will get the new material. So you can also go back and then read and make sure that you're up to speed still on the latest content about Nitrox. So everybody gets this new material, and that's a super cool thing about the way we do things at SSI.
And if you have been an avid Nitrox diver, enriched Nitrox diver over the last many years, still worth reading it, the new one, because again, first of all, we need to refresh our memory every now and again. We will never remember everything we read, but also it's just such a fun and interesting read, and it's updated information. So it's not completely different, but it's updated. So you will definitely learn something new if you have done your course a few years ago. And it's free.
Yeah,
You already have
we
it.
explain see things differently as well now. So maybe a concept that felt a little bit harder to understand before will become a little bit more clear, and that can help you with your diving. So go ahead, go have a read. We'd be really interested to hear your feedback about the material as always. So if you've got comments, then let us know. But it's out really, really soon. So keep a lookout for it. You'll have got a newsletter telling you that on the 8th, or at least a week of the 8th of June, the material will be available. So keep a lookout for that, and it'll appear in a bunch of languages. And as we go through the rollout process the first couple of weeks, more and more languages will be available as we go.
100%. So that's exciting. Thank you, Adam, so much. If you have not done Nitrox yet, go over to ScubaGo right now and book your course. There is no excuses. Absolutely no excuses. It will make you a safer and better diver. And in the process, maybe think about getting a computer.
Yeah. I think everybody's already got computers and already fully Nitroxed up. But if you're one of the ones out there who hasn't, get involved.
If we inspired you to take a Nitrox course now, please put it also in the comments. We're excited to hear that.
Yeah.
We're going to go run somewhere and ask for commission.
That's the point.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
Awesome,
thank you, everyone, for listening,
so much.
as always. And we will hear you in the next one. The next one's going to be a fun one with Memo again. We always have some silly topics to talk about.
I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye.